What is going on, everybody? I am back today to talk about a film that is a little bit older now that I have seen multiple times, and it is a movie that I feel like gets hated on a little bit too much. And every time I've watched this movie, I feel like I enjoy it a little bit more. And I don't by any means think that this movie is perfect. I don't think that it's like the greatest horror film ever made, but there's a lot that I really like about it. And this is from director James Wan, who I have been a huge fan of from very early in his career. I feel like he has a relatively consistent catalog when it comes to horror. When you look at films like this or Insidious or the first two Conjuring films, or a movie that I absolutely adore, Malignant, the original Saw film, he just has a vision and knows how to execute it in a way that I feel like is so immersive and engaging. And it's what I love about him as a storyteller. And the movie today that I'm going to be discussing is one of his earliest movies. And I feel like it's one that doesn't get talked about quite as often as a lot of the other movies in his catalog. And the film I'm going to be discussing with you today is Dead Silence. Dead Silence is directed by James Wan. Jamie returns to his hometown in search of answers to his wife's murder, which occurred after receiving a weird package containing a ventriloquist dummy named Billy, which may be linked to the legend of ventriloquist Mary Shaw. Destined to find out the truth, Jamie goes to the town of Ravens Fair, where Shaw used to perform and is buried, but Jamie is in for far more than he expected. So, like I said, I really enjoy this movie, and by no means do I think that this is perfect, but I think that it showcases what makes James Wan so special as a filmmaker. There are so many hallmarks of what would exist later on in movies that he would make that I appreciate, whether that be sleek editing choices, the way he builds tension in very horrific scenes, the way he lets the camera linger on specific things rather than just relying on jump scares to get a visceral reaction out of the audience. And there are some jump scares in the movie, but I think Wan does a really great job of balancing jump scares with genuine horror. And I'm excited to talk about this movie with you today. So at the beginning of the film, we are introduced to Jamie, played by Ryan Kwanten, who, as the plot description states, we see him with his wife. He goes out to get takeout, comes back home, and his wife is dead shortly after they open this box that has a ventriloquist dummy in it. And we learn that he is from this town called Ravens Fair, where there is this legend about a woman named Mary Shaw who had a ton of ventriloquist dummies. And there's this whole little poem that they read that's like, if you go to sleep and you wake up and you see Mary Shaw, don't scream or you'll die. And you get your tongue ripped out when you scream and you see her. And so he does not know why his wife died. And there is a police officer, Detective Lipton, played by Donnie Wahlberg, who is after him because he thinks that he murdered his wife. And so when he gets back home, he finds out that his father has remarried, and he's talking to this woman, and she says, your father has completely and totally changed. And when he goes to talk to his dad, he doesn't believe any of it, and the entirety of the film becomes Jamie in this small town trying to investigate into Mary Shaw and to find out who murdered his wife. So, like I said, I really like this movie a lot, and I don't think it's perfect by any means, but I think it's very enjoyable. And for the positives, I want to start with atmosphere. One of the things I talk about in horror that lacks so much nowadays is great atmosphere, and this movie has tons of atmosphere from the very first shot of the film. James Wan does an amazing job at building these environments. There's a flashback sequence in the middle of the movie that I love the way that it transitions into the flashback. He goes to an old cemetery in this. There's the abandoned theater where the ventriloquism was done. There's so many cool set pieces in this movie that James Wan pays very close attention to detail with, that makes it really easy to suck yourself into the story. And I think there's something so important about atmosphere and production design in particular, and this movie has it in droves in a way that I just think is very special. I love the way that this movie is shot. There are a lot of really cool editing transitions in this movie. James Wan is known for some really neat transitions. He does a really great job moving the camera and paying attention to cinematography. There are a lot of scenes where the camera holds on something, whether that be the ventriloquist dummy moving throughout the movie, seeing things in the corner of the frame, making you as a viewer focus on something that is unsettling and truly terrifying. And that's just the hallmark of a really fantastic director, is when you can pay that close of attention to detail, to the visuals, and to keep your audience engaged. I also really like the story of this movie. A lot of people say it feels like an adult Goosebumps episode, and I think that's a fine comparison. It's much darker and more grotesque, and that's something that I can appreciate. But it's easy to immerse yourself into. It just feels like a fun horror story. I do think the performances in this are really bad, pretty much all around. Donnie Wahlberg in this with like the electric razor, he's like going everywhere and he's constantly shaving with the electric razor. He's like the worst cop in the world, and it's almost laughable. It doesn't necessarily feel like it's intentional camp like Malignant. It just feels like it's bad, which it's endearing though. It's charming. It's like you're watching it and you're like, oh, this is bad, but it's funny to watch. Ryan Kwanten's character, he's not great either. I feel like he's got some really poor dialogue delivery. Most of the actors in this just aren't very good, other than the woman who plays Mary Shaw, who I think is phenomenal in this. Truly terrifying. It gives me early Insidious vibes, which is something that I can really appreciate because Insidious is one of my favorite modern horror movies. But despite the really poor performances, outside of that, I think there are some pacing issues. There's some dialogue that feels a little bit cyclical. The movie gets overly expository sometimes, where it just feels like it has to dump information on you over and over again to keep you invested, rather than just let you live in this world and let creepy imagery speak for itself. But I think aside from that, it's just a really easy movie to immerse yourself into and enjoy. And it's a world that I like being in. And I love when James Wan has concepts like this and just goes all in with them. Obviously, throughout his career, now he's been able to get better actors in his movie, and he pays closer attention to detail to the performances in his films. I love the Conjuring series, and I think that the first two films, especially, the performances are really good. I love the performances in the original Insidious movie. And this is a movie that I feel like if you haven't seen it in his catalog, it's totally worth watching. I don't think enough people talk about it, and I had a ton of fun rewatching it this time around. So have you seen Dead Silence? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought. I thought this movie was a ton of fun. I really enjoyed it, and I always look forward to revisiting it. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.